Okay, guys, we've prepped our list, especially for this postcard campaign, right? We've got the design of our postcard done. We just need to connect the two now so that we can start processing this and start printing our postcards. Couple of things first. See the headers all across our list file? Each one of those headers has to have a corresponding layer and variable name in Photoshop. Okay, now I like to see, in this case, I like to have my Excel file open so I can see the header names while I'm making these changes, but I'm going to have to close this before I actually do the import. Okay, but just so I can see, I'm going to drag this off screen a little bit. Actually, let's just make it small and leave it right here. And what this means is, notice my headline. If I go over here to Photoshop, I have a layer called headline. That corresponds directly with that header name right there in Excel. So you have to match those names up. But notice here, if I turn that layer off and on, that's controlling my headline. I've also got my bullet points. Check this out. So I've got bullet point 1, which you'll recall, that is the exact name, and it's case sensitive. I mean, it has to be identical. Okay, bullet 1 and bullet 4 both appear. Those are the names of the layers. Bullet 1, bullet 4. I'll hit Control D here and get rid of this temporary mask right there. Selector, I should say. The image that's getting swapped out. Okay, I've called it date image here, and I think I actually made a mistake in Excel. Yep, I called it image date. So this is one of those things that you've got to watch for. They have to be identical. So I'm going to click here and change that to date underscore image. Hit enter. And now, because of that change, guys, I have to go to File, Save As, and I have to re-save this. Okay? So yes, I want to replace it. Those are the kinds of changes that you have to watch out for. If you completely restructure this by changing the name of the header, you have to re-export that file to update that information. Because when you're working inside of Excel like this, you're not actually working on that CSV file per se. Okay, you're working on an Excel file and then you export it as a CSV file. But those have to correspond and be identical. If you find you messed up, fix it and resave the file. If you don't have those matched up, you will get errors and it will cause you headaches. Trust me. So if there are any fields that are in the Excel file and you're not using them in your design, here's what I want you to do. I'll show you down here at the bottom. Let's go ahead and just get rid of all of those actually for now. So here's what I want you to do. If you're using information headers in your Excel file, but you're not using them in the Photoshop design, you still have to have a layer with that name, but then you just don't do anything with it. Okay? Works like this. Full name. In this particular case, not used on the front of the card. It is used on the back side. I use it there, but I'm not using it on the front of the card. So what I want to do is create a layer here, double click on the layer name, and I'm going to call it the exact header that I'm not going to be using. Full underscore name, hit enter. Okay, that corresponds to that right there. Now I'm also not using last name because I did use the last name to build my call to action, but in the actual Photoshop file, I'm not using last name. I'm not using gender. I'm not using address 1. I'm not using city, state, or zip. None of that actually shows up on this postcard. What that means is I have to create a bogus layer for each one of those. Okay, so last name, gender, address 1, city, state, zip 5 digit. Let's see if I can remember all of that in one sitting here. Nope, I've already forgot. Last name, enter, new layer, gender, new layer, city, state, and zip, I believe, is zip underscore 5 digit, just like that. Let's verify all of these. Guys, it's case sensitive. That means any capitals, any spaces, anything. I recommend you don't do any spaces. I don't even think spaces will work for the names, but don't do that. If you have to have a space, use the underscore. So we've got full name, last name, gender. Oh, I did forget address. So address underscore 1. We've got city, state, and zip underscore 5 digits. So let's just do address underscore 1. Okay, and again, what this is, any fields that appear in your list, but you will not be using them in that file, you have to create a layer with the exact name as that header, and then you just don't do anything with the layer. It's very important. The reason for this is when you export this file, you're creating those columns, you're creating those headers. When you import that into Photoshop, Photoshop is going to open it up. It's going to see those headers and it's going to say, hey, what's the deal? You're not even using this in this file. Why do I have this data? What am I supposed to do with it? And it doesn't know how to deal with it. Okay, so you're creating these little placeholder images and just telling Photoshop, hey, dude, don't worry about it. I got this. In this case, some of those fields will be used when we do the backside of the card. Okay, and sometimes you have data in there just to do some processing. For example, the gender, male and female. We've got that in our list and we need it, but we're using it as a test for an outcome of other things. Okay, but we don't use that actual field in the postcard design. So just remember that every header has to match a layer. Okay, once that's done, now we're going to go to Image, Variables, and Define. Now, right away, what I want you to do is locate the layers that have the elements that you're not going to be using. Okay, so full name, for example, go to full name, select visibility, highlight this name, and change it to exactly the same as the header and the layer name. Okay, change that, click the drop down, go to the next one. What we're doing is we're dealing with those headers that won't be used. And you'll notice a little asterisk gets placed after it once that variable has been assigned. In this case, I've got somewhere a last name already in there, but no worries if we're not using it. Gender, same thing. And what we're doing is just setting these up and then not doing anything with them. So Photoshop will be fine with bringing them in and then just leaving them there. Now, alternately, when you're done processing your list, you could go in and delete any of the headers, the columns that you're not using. And then you wouldn't have to do this step. Okay, and address is the last one. All right, now the important part next is the elements that we are using. So like the headline, those bullet points, the first name, the pearl, and the image. So what we do is click the layer drop down. I've already got most of these in here, guys, so I'm just going to explain what's up. So we'll start top to bottom. Headline. I've checked text replacement and called it headline. You've basically got, Photoshop is smart enough to know if the layer that you're dealing with is pixels or if it's text. If it's pixels, this is going to say pixel replacement, and that's how we'll swap out images. If it's text, it's just going to pull the text from your CSV file and replace whatever text is on that headline layer with your text. You get to keep the font, you get to keep the sizing, you get to keep all the text attributes, all of that. So next, let's go to bullet 1, and you can see the same thing. You select text replacement because that's what you want, and you name it the exact same thing as the layer. Okay, bullet 4, same thing. So just remember, every header in your Excel file has to have a matching layer, and you will name that variable the same as the layer and the header. All of these will be the same. The first name that you see right here, same thing. The call to action, that is literally all you do. Every one of these is a text replacement with 2 exceptions. We've got our color variation and we've got our image being swapped out. So when I click the drop down here, we've got date image. Notice this says pixel replacement, and we've put in date image. All it's going to do is pull that Excel record and see a file name, and it's going to use that file name and load that into this same box where the image is appearing. We've also got our hue adjustment layer, and that is called color theme. Notice that since it is an adjustment layer, the only option is to adjust the visibility of it. Okay, either that layer is off or on, and that's going to be controlled, you'll remember, by the Boolean values true or false. Just make sure the names are matched up. So once your variables are all matched up like that, click this drop down up here where it says define, switch it to data sets. Now, I have already linked the database, okay? So I'm going to have to redo it again. But here's one little caveat. You cannot have this file open in Excel while you're doing this. So I'm going to hit close. Then here in Photoshop, I'll hit import. Click select file. I'm going to change my file type to CSV. And then postcard batch 1 is the file that I'm working with right now. That's the one that I exported. I'll hit load, and hopefully I don't get an error. Looks good. You want to make sure that this option, use first column for data set names, make sure that that's checked, because that lets Photoshop know that first record contains all my header names. So make sure that's checked. If you want to overwrite anything that you have, like for example, right now, I've got some data in there, right? I want to overwrite that. So replace the existing data. If you happen to have multiple lists that you export at different times, you could, build that into this file, but I don't recommend doing it that way. So hit OK, and provided we don't have any problems. But now at this point, with them linked, I've imported the data into Photoshop, and I can scroll through here. The headlines change, the first last bullet change, the color changes, the image changes, the purl changes. Okay, now, guys, I know this is a lot to tackle. It seems like a lot of information. It seems like a lot of work, but it is worth it. And you do it a few times, and you'll get it, okay? If you're not real familiar with Excel and Photoshop, take it slow, man. You can do this. But look at the power and flexibility that this offers. Man, if it was easy to do, everybody would be doing it. But the results that you get from this type of personalization, that should be incentive enough, okay, just to at least learn the basics, right? If you get stuck, as always, feel free to post questions. We will be happy to help out as much as possible. We've got one more thing to look at, though, with this particular document, that has to do with this handwritten note that you see here. And on the back side of the card, on the back side of the postcard, notice how this really does look like it's handwritten. It's not just a handwriting font. It's more than that. It's slightly imperfect, but realistically believable. That's an important step. So in the next video, and this is the last video for this bonus module, we'll show you a powerful technique that we developed to make your envelopes and postcards look like they truly were hand addressed.